you feel like the UK is way behind other countries on this issue, and certainly it feels, watching, you know, the two politicians over the weekend, there is no clarity on their position, is there?
I think that's true, but there was no clarity even among scientists for quite some time. And I think the evidence has shifted. And this is because we know the routes of transmission of the coronavirus. We know that cloth masks and face coverings can be effective at containing the droplets that we emit when we're infected. And a very important thing that we've learned is that we can be infectious without realizing it. Many of us develop no symptoms. We're infectious before we develop symptoms. So all of these things have changed the evidence so that it's now, in my opinion, quite strongly in favor of using face coverings in enclosed spaces where we're likely to come into contact especially with strangers, so that we're not part of a small group of cohorts. And so I think that the government should be very clear. It's not consistent to make it mandatory, say, in public transport, and not make it mandatory in other enclosed, busy public spaces, because a virus doesn't know the behavior of the virus is the same in all of these spaces.
I mean, Hilary, it's interesting to get your perspective on that, you know, that changing information, because I remember when I was here before, 3 months ago, there was huge confusion. There was an idea that if you're having a face mask, then you're probably touching your face more. We're not familiar with wearing masks in this country, so therefore people wearing them in all sorts of weird ways. But you feel like you've shifted a little bit on balance to wearing masks.
Yeah, Dr. Venk is right. The scientific evidence has shifted somewhat. In the early days, the government was saying that if you look at the Asian countries where people have been wearing masks forever, the rate of flu transmission isn't any lower than it is whether you wear a mask or not, compared to countries where they don't wear masks. So the idea then was masks don't give very much protection, if any. However, there's now growing evidence that the virus could be airborne rather than transmitted in droplets, and therefore wearing a mask could trap some of those virus particles in droplets if someone's asymptomatic and potentially transmitting the virus. So that element of evidence has changed, and I think Dr. Venk is right. If we're going to ban it, going to make it obligatory for people to wear masks on public transport, makes no sense not to do that in public spaces, public areas where people can't socially distance and people could be carrying the virus.
OK, well, let's talk to Dr Bharat, because I think you feel that shops should refuse entry to people if they don't have face coverings. And one of the real concerns with this is that could heighten tensions. Why should the responsibility be on the shop owner to make sure that their customers are wearing the face masks? And lots of our viewers getting in touch saying, we can't afford to constantly be buying face masks to be able to go out and do the shopping. We don't have enough money to afford that. I mean, I think Hilary's been very clear about face coverings don't have to be the medical mask. It can just be a jumper. But the worry is that the shop owners having to police this could cause problems for them.
Well, we've had a lot of ambivalent messages, and in the absence of a clear directive, like on public transport, you are obliged to wear a mask, then we need similar clear directives that in an enclosed space, like a supermarket, you will also wear one. And what I have seen promoted by premises owners is giving them a hand gel to sanitize their hands before entering, and a mask, and they go around the shop and they can dispose their mask off when they leave or put on their own mask. It only makes common sense, and we need consistency here. The United Kingdom has lagged behind on many parameters. We were late going into lockdown, we were late setting up our contact tracing, our testing, and we are dragging our feet with regards to face coverings and face masks.
On that point of affordability of masks, because it is amazing how quickly you do go through them. Can you ever reuse a mask if you're using a different face covering? Do you just wash it and then it's safe?
Of course you can, because you can have these masks sanitized in many ways. They can either be washed or you could even iron it to, if you wished to say, okay, it's heavily contaminated, now what can I do? Well, ironing it is giving it a heat treatment. But masks are now not expensive, and as we've already said, we wear a mask, a face covering or something. It is not 100%, but it is reducing the number of droplets coming out from an infectious person. Like our fellow colleagues have said, many people are infectious but without symptoms. So what are we going to do? At least we can reduce the number of droplets coming out by wearing a covering.
Dr. Fenty, we're having a number of people getting in touch saying, although we agree with the idea of having to wear face masks in public, they have breathing difficulties, they have asthma, and actually they can't wear a face mask. So where does that leave them?
Yeah, that's a very good point. But I want to address the question of affordability. If you can now have very well-designed, close-fitting cloth masks, and you could have 2 or 3 of them and simply sort of use them like clothing. You know, you could have one in the wash, one to spare, and one that you wear. So I don't think it has to be an ongoing expense. Now, the point that your viewers raised is a very important one. And our report suggests for them, you could use face shields, which are also reusable, washable, etc. They're a one-time, relatively inexpensive item. Now, the point is that there will be some people who cannot wear it. But if, say, 95%, all of the people who can wear it are required to do so, it will still have a very good public health benefit.
It's interesting, isn't it? We've also got lots of people saying, actually, that working in shops, that shop workers would feel happier if people were wearing masks, because the reality of social distancing as people come out of lockdown and shop and do more is quite hard. You know, that they were people nip across an aisle and you're slightly in someone's space. So some of them are saying, actually, please don't make us enforce it because it'll just lead to conflict. Others saying we'd all feel safer if it was compulsory, because then they'd be protected.
The real way to do this is look at the evidence. You know, Scotland made it mandatory. It has not been a problem in Scotland. People have, you know, since last week, have been going about their business. People have been shopping, etc. It gives people confidence. I should also point out that the best way to revive our economy is to prevent repeated disruptive lockdowns. These are disruptive economically, but they're also disruptive psychologically. And the more tools we can throw at the problem to avoid disruptive lockdowns, the better off we are in reviving our economy. There was a study by Goldman Sachs, you know, not exactly a sort of left-wing liberal organization, and they actually said that it would the use of face masks would actually affect the GDP recovery by about 5%. That's quite a significant amount. And so I think that from every point of view, economic as well as public health, the two are not in contradiction here. It is a good idea to use all of our tools, which include social distancing, hand washing, wiping of common surfaces like doorknobs and handrails, and wearing face coverings. They're all independent measures that together reduce the chances of repeated surges and lockdowns. And the hope is that will get us through until we get a permanent solution, like a vaccine or a medicine.
Yeah.
And then eventually we can try and beat this.
That's the ultimate goal,
And I also
isn't
say,
it?
yeah, and if we can reduce the base level down very low, it also makes it less risky for situations where face masks may be problematic. For example, primary schools, you know, things like that. So
Sure.
we want to make it society as safe as possible, reduce the probability of disruptive lockdowns, and help our economy sort of get back on track.
Hilary, perhaps we can come to you on this. This is Nicola on Twitter, and I think this is one of the concerns that I would have of making them mandatory. She says, I will not wear a mask. Sorry, I don't feel that it's necessary. As long as I wash my hands, I don't cough or splatter over anyone and keep my distance, that's easy enough for me to do.
Well, she doesn't know whether she's asymptomatically carrying COVID-19. She might think she's healthy and fit and well, but so many people have been, despite carrying COVID-19. So she is potentially putting other people at risk. So you could say that she's being selfish. She might feel well. And if everybody felt like that and nobody wore masks, then probably the transmission rate would increase. There are very few people who can't wear masks, by the way. I mean, Dr. Venke there mentioned asthmatics. One of the groups of people have been reported as saying that they might find it difficult to wear a mask. But actually, asthma is an expiratory problem rather than an inspiratory problem. The mask doesn't stop people breathing easily. And actually, you could argue that asthmatics are probably the group of people who perhaps need to be protected more than anybody else to prevent getting COVID-19 and that exacerbating any pre-existing respiratory conditions. So I think that those people, and in our poll, there are about 32%, aren't there, that say we don't think it should be made obligatory. The more people who think we don't need to wash our hands, we don't need to wear masks, we don't need to take precautions, we can go to the beach, we can get in cars with lots of people from different households, they're the ones who will put the transmission rate up.